Hello, and welcome to the DEBRA International Patient Community Webinar for February 2016. Thank you for joining us. Right now, I'd like to turn the program over to Michael Fitzpatrick for introductions. Michael?
Thank you, Robert. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us for this first webinar that DEBRA International is undertaking. Thank you to Amicus for making it possible, and for Blue Sky for the support in the technical side of things. As I said, this is our first webinar at DEBRA International, so it's a learning curve for everybody. The presenters, thank you very much for giving up so much of your time over the last week or so to prepare for this and to get the pack ready. So we hope we have a lot to offer for everybody. It is information session, and we encourage questions and answers, and we'll take questions and answers as we go through the process. I'll just make some quick introductions now, and as we go through, you'll see the people's profiles on the slides. Today we have with us Dr. Dimitra Kurtzi, who will be talking about...
Hello, everybody.
Thank you. Mike Jager, who will be talking as well.
Hello.
Jane Gershwitz, also speaking today for us from Amicus as well.
Good afternoon.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us, as I said. I'll just start off the slide pack, and I'll just put up a bit of a disclaimer. This is just for everybody. This information is it's the views of the people who are present at this meeting. It doesn't necessarily represent the views of DEBRA International as a group. This is information only, and should be taken in that way. And any interest in a particular clinical trial should be discussed with your treating health professional, and taking into account your individual requirements. Yeah, thank you, and just take that on board. As I said, we are learning as much as everyone else is learning, so I hope everybody gets something out of it. I'd like to start off by apologising on behalf of Rainer Riedel, who was listed as a presenter, but unfortunately due to a scheduling error on my part, he's unable to join us, so he sends his apologies. Right, okay, so I think we'll start off. Our first presenter today is Mike Jager, who will talk about his individual experiences and perspectives as a person who's undertaken clinical trials. And again, as Robert suggested at the introduction, if anybody has any questions or they'd like to pose, they can type them in the question bubble box, and we'll get to them at the end of each presentation. And then we hope to have a more open question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So, if you're ready, Mike, if you'd like to start off your talk with about your perspective of participating in clinical trials. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Yeah, I'm Mike Jager. I'm also on the executive committee of DEBRA International. I'm vice chair and a trustee of DEBRA UK. I think the first clinical trial I participated in, I think, was when I was about 10 years old, and it was a fairly basic trial at a time. Well, it was a study more than a trial, to be quite honest. And the study was quite a common study now, in particular with EB. It was based around blistering, and it was at the time just a heated suction cup on the skin to see how long it took for the skin to blister. The same very primitive but very effective technology is still used today. But that was my first taste of research, if you like, or taking part in any kind of medical research related to EB. I mean, looking back, EB research has come a very, very long way in just a few years, really. I mean, only 15, I think around 15, 16 years ago, the gene that is defective or not present in recessive dystrophic EB wasn't even identified. So since the identification of that gene, collagen 7, research has come on absolute leaps and bounds. It might not always seem that way. I do have RDEB myself. It might not always seem that way to people with EB, because obviously we all want an end to, this horrific disorder. But research really has come on a long way since those times, and since then I've participated in a number of tissue studies and clinical trials and things like that. My overall experience of clinical trials is very good. I've not had any real negative experience in clinical trials, and I think the reasons for that is I do take ownership of my own health. Now that seems quite an obvious thing to say to people, but I mean, my mum's generation, for instance, she comes from a generation where everyone put their trust in doctors and things like that. I'm not saying people shouldn't do that, but people put their life literally in other people's hands back then, whereas I think now people are more in a position to take ownership of their own health and want to know much more information about what's going on and how and what is going to be done to them in a clinical trial or indeed with any sort of procedure, medical procedure they undertake. People are much more savvy now, I think, and much more clued up when they go into these things. My experience is it's all about the information. It's all about the information that you're given from the start, and you're making a very informed decision. I would say that anyone who has got any reservations about a clinical trial or any concerns about going into a clinical trial, please ask the questions. There is no such thing as a daft question. There really isn't. You need to know. You need to know all the information, and that's from whatever the drug is that might be included in the trial, if there is one, down to your expenses that may be on offer and may be paid. You need to know every single detail, and I think these days clinicians and researchers are very keen for people to ask questions. They're very keen, and it's very well structured, and they're prepared to give you the right information. But obviously, there is some things that won't always be seen as maybe important, but might be very important to the person taking part in a trial. One example is I have carers that come in each day. As on me, one of the areas that is worse on me is my back. So obviously, not being able to see my own back, I need some help with that. I have carers coming in. So obviously, if I'm going to participate in a clinical trial and they need to see certain areas of my skin, I have to arrange the logistical aspects around that. I have to contact my carer. I have to make sure that she can go with me and what time she can go with me, and even down to things sometimes like is accommodation covered within the clinical trial for the carer as well, things like that. And I think people are often put off taking part in a clinical trial because they think, I need a carer to go with me, and that's going to take more money out of the pot of the trial and things. The thing I would say to people in those cases is, don't worry about that. These sort of things, when the clinicians and the researchers are going for money for the clinical trial, they're looking for funding. They usually I think, include these possibilities in the funding, certainly with EB research anyway. So that funding is usually available because a carer with you for a clinical trial is, for some people, an absolutely essential aspect of it. So that's been something that I've come across. I've not had a bad experience yet with those sort of things. Another issue for people as well very often is when people go for a clinical trial, they worry about what happens if I'm ill. What happens if I become ill halfway through the trial and I can't attend certain follow-up appointments and things like that? Well, usually that's been accounted for as well. I mean, that's not to say that there might be occasions where people have to pull out the clinical trial and feel bad for that, and obviously that's not ideal. But again, I don't think that should be an extra stress for participants. If that's what has to happen, then that is, I'm afraid, something that happens. And I think, again, researchers are usually quite receptive to that. They're usually quite helpful, and they understand that when you're dealing with a very severe disorder, that is always a risk as well, that a participant might have to step aside in those cases. Also, another thing, again, might sound quite an obvious thing, but when participating in a clinical trial, you can't really participate in another clinical trial. So I think that's something you have to bear in mind, particularly with EB research. Recently, I had an opportunity to partake in a clinical trial, and there was one or two other trials that were available to me as well. So that can be quite difficult sometimes. And again, this is where the informed decision comes into it, is that, arm yourself, I would say, with all the information possible, and see which trial is best, first and foremost, for you. And at the end of the day, these EB research, although it has come on leaps and bounds, it is still very new. And the fantastic thing overall, I think, is that we are now getting clinical trials for EB. I remember a time when this was almost unheard of. That it was a pipe dream. It was something people were saying, "Wow, wouldn't it be great if we could have clinical trials for EB?" Well, the great thing about that is it is happening, and it is happening quite regularly. And some things will help, and some things won't. And another aspect is, what if it doesn't help me? What if if I go for a clinical trial and if it's a drug, or if it's an infusion or anything, what if it doesn't help? And I think that's a worry for some people, is that, if this doesn't help me, then I've wasted my time. If this doesn't help me, I've wasted those trips to maybe somewhere quite far away. I would say in those cases, I don't think any study is a complete waste of time. I don't think any clinical trial, particularly with EB, is a complete waste of time. I see it as, if something doesn't work, then the researchers need to know that doesn't work. They need to know why that doesn't work. That in itself is actually very, very useful to the researchers. And I think people can take that away with them and think, well, it's not been a complete waste of time. It has been a help, because it's allowing those researchers to then move forward and think, well, why didn't this work? Why didn't this work in this particular patient? And I find that a question that comes up in it quite a lot, and people feel quite disheartened, and they go away thinking this hasn't helped. And I always think to myself, well, it hasn't helped me as an individual, no, but it is helping EB research in the long term. because at the end of the day, if something doesn't work, we need to know why. I think that's about it. For me, I'd be very happy to answer anyone's questions on a patient's aspect of clinical trials. What I would say is, it's nothing to be afraid of. Clinical trials are your own choice. If you do not want to participate in them, don't. If you do want to participate in EB trials and you're wondering how to, then contact organisations like DEBRA, contact your own dermatologist and say to them, look, I'm interested in clinical trials, I'm interested in what's available, and I'm sure everyone together will help you find the right trials that are right for you. There's lots more of them coming up these days, and I wish everyone luck, because I believe that EB research is moving on very quick. I don't like the word cure. That is not to say I don't think there will be treatments for EB. I do think there will be treatments for EB, but EB is a hugely complex disorder. And I do actually believe within the next 10, 15 years, there will be viable treatments that will very much help people with EB and very much help people to live a better and more comfortable life. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mike. It looks like we do have one question for you. Mike, how do you find out about the trials that interest? I think that was cut off. Probably the trials that interest you.
The trials that interest me, I found out what tends to happen is once things kind of spiral. I don't know about in the States, but I spoke to my own dermatologist and I said I was interested in trials. I was interested in general research. I mean, I'm on the research, the Charitable Activities Committee of DEBRA UK, so I've got a working interest in trials. But before that, when I was just a patient, so to speak, I found out about trials from my own dermatologist, and I told my own dermatologist I would be interested in taking part in a trial, and they put me in touch with a Guy's Hospital in London, and they were running a study at the time. It was just a tissue study at the time where they just needed to take a small biopsy. And generally what happens if you're interested in these things, it certainly happens in the UK, I don't know about the States, but if you're interested in these things and if you do one, then people tend to say, oh, are you interested in this in future? Because we can put you on a list and we will contact you. And now I find that people come to me asking me, do I want to take part in things rather than me having to go to them.
Thank you. It looks like we have one more question for you, Mike. What was your motivation for participating in the trials?
I think people have different motivations. My particular motivation is I've always had an interest in the science aspect of it, and I've always wanted to kind of help EB research, directly help EB research. And as I said, even if something doesn't help me in particular, I always think that that doesn't mean it's lost. It doesn't mean it's dead in the water. I think it means that that those clinicians and those researchers, as I said, need to find out why it doesn't help. So that in itself is very useful. So whether it's a success or not, you are very much helping EB research move forward.
Great. Thank you again, Mike. Now we're going to move on with the presentation. Our next presenter is Dr. Dimitra Karitsi. Doctor?
Hello. I hope everyone is hearing me. I'm Dimitra Karitsi. I'm working as a consultant dermatology in the EB Center in Freiburg, Germany, where I'm integrated in diagnostics, treatment, multidisciplinary care of persons with EB, and of course have also experienced in conducting clinical trials. First of all, I would like to thank Mike because he so nicely presented what are the most important points from the patient's point of view when how to decide whether they want to participate in a trial or not. And when talking about the clinical trial for EB, we decided to use the current trial of SD005 phase 3 trial that is a large trial for EB individuals throughout the world. And I would like to introduce this trial just to make clear how clinical trials work. So this trial is a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled phase 3 trial. And the aim is to evaluate the safety and efficacy of Zerblissa, this is a new cream, in 130 patients with various subtypes of EB. And to make it more understandable, I think I would have to explain the terms very briefly. So a randomized trial means that the participants of the trial are allocated at random, meaning by chance alone, to receive one or more clinical interventions. One of the interventions is the routine standard care or a placebo. In our case, it means that some of the patients will receive the Zerblissa cream and the others will receive a placebo cream. What does it mean when we say double-blind trial? It means that in the trial, neither the trial participants nor the trial investigators know which type of intervention its participants receive. And this is very important, especially in phase 3 trials, to be sure that what effects you see are real, so that neither the physician nor the participant can state over positive results when they are not there. And the phase 3 trial means that it is a large trial, a multi-center trial with many patients. In this phase 3 trials, the drug is tested on the patients to assess efficacy, effectiveness, and safety. So at this phase, you already know that the drug is safe, and you know that there is some therapeutic effect from the phase 2 trials, but you really want to determine the drug's therapeutic effect more carefully. Then, to just make it more clearer, what will happen or what happens in this trial, the participants will be randomized to 2 treatment groups receiving either the Zerblissa 6% cream or placebo. The study cream has to be applied over the entire body once daily for 3 months. And the objective of the trial is to evaluate closure of a selected target chronic wound during these 3 months and assess the effect of the cream in itching, pain, full body wound and lesion coverage, and assess how safe the cream is. Who can participate in this trial? The participant must have the diagnosis of simplex, recessive dystrophic, or junctional non-Hurley EB. The patients participating must be 1 month and older. They must have 1 target wound with a pre-specified size range at study entry, and the target wound must be of at least a certain age. And of course, the most important inclusion criterion is that the patient or patient's legal representative give the informed consent. And nowadays, if a patient is under the age of 18 but capable of providing assent, he has also to provide a signed assent. So even if children participate in the trial, they should be asked whether they want to participate or not. And finally, participating in the clinical trial means that the physicians doing the trial and the participants have to be in a close contact, and the patient or the caretaker must be willing to comply with the protocol requirements. This is very important. Who cannot participate? What are the exclusion criteria? The selected target wound cannot be infected. No other investigational drug can be used within the last 30 days before enrollment in the trial. no immunotherapy or cytotoxic chemotherapy within the last 60 days, no systemic or topical steroidal therapy within the last 30 days, and no systemic antibiotics within the last 7 days before inclusion in the trial. There has to be no current or former malignancy, no arterial or venous disorder resulting in skin ulcers, and the patients don't have to be pregnant or breastfeeding during the study. This is information that you can find online quite easily if you want to see it more accurately on your own. There are several clinical trial locations in the U.S., in California, in Colorado, Illinois, Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas, and also several clinical trial locations in Europe. As I already mentioned, 130 participants will be included in this trial. So in Europe, there is a center in Austria, in Salzburg, 2 in France, in Nice and in Paris, in Germany, in Freiburg, in Italy, in Milan, in the Netherlands, in Groningen, in Poland, in Warsaw, and in the United Kingdom, in London. So you can choose which center is nearest to you. Where do you find more information about this trial? For physicians, there are several clinical trial registries where you can look at, and this information I have just shown now is from the clinicaltrials.gov, and for patients, parents, or caretakers, you can check the page where the study is shown. What are the logistics of the trial? So, for all the participants, it is of course important to know how much effort will the participation in the trial mean for me or my child. It is important to know that the participants of the trial have to have daily wound dressings. And of course, this is not easy for everybody. As I already mentioned, when you're participating in a trial, you have to be in a very good contact to your physician, to your treating physician who performs the trial. And you have to inform the trial doctors about every change of the health status, even if you think that it is not associated with the drug that is being tested, even if you think that it is not possible to be a side effect of the trial drug, you have to report every change of the health status. You have to travel to the trial site several times during the 3 months of the trial. But the good thing is that the travel costs will be reimbursed by the company. And another big and important question is what will happen during trial visits. Of course, we want to assess the whole skin, so complete dressing change is required, but there will be no painful interventions. Why are we doing, or why is this phase 3 trial happening? Because there were quite promising results from the trials before that. So in the phase 2 trials, in an open-label phase 2 study, the cream was well tolerated by all patients and resulted in complete closure of 88% of target chronic wounds within 1 month and a 57% reduction in body surface area with blisters and wounds after 3 months of treatment. In this trial, 48 individuals with EB enrolled, aged more than 6 months, across 7 sites in the U.S., and the enrollment happened already within a few months. And the patients that completed the trial were given the opportunity to continue receiving the cream for daily use in an open-label extension study. This is also the case in SD005, so the patients can continue receiving the cream for daily use in an open-label extension study. But if this trial does not fit you and you want to have more information about clinical trials, there are several internet pages where you can read more about that. One very good page is clinicaltrials.gov. There you can find information on what is a clinical study, what are observational studies, who conducts a clinical study, and more like that. It is important to state that clinical trials are the key to developing new methods to prevent, detect, and treat all kinds of disorders. It is only through clinical trials that us researchers and physicians can determine whether new treatments are safe and effective and work better than what we are currently using. So when you take part in a clinical trial, you add to our knowledge about your disease and help also improve patients and possibly also your own care. So clinical trials are nowadays an important part of the work of physicians, and we can all see that there are more and more clinical trials starting for EB and I think that this means that patients should also learn more about clinical trials. Another big question is, why should I participate in a clinical trial in general? Mike has already mentioned it. Participation in a clinical trial is voluntary. So you can freely choose whether you want to participate or not. And this does not change in any way that you are continue to being treated by the same EB doctor as you have been treated before. And on the other side, you can also withdraw your consent at any time if you feel that you cannot handle this anymore or that the drug is not helping you. Clinical trials can only be conducted nowadays if FDA and European regulators give their okay. And I can tell you that the regulations are very strict and getting stricter and stricter each year, just to be sure that what we are doing is correct. There is still no approved drug for EB, and the best available treatment right now is symptomatic treatment of blisters, wounds, and systemic complications. So clinical trials may pave the way for new treatment options. And as I already mentioned, by participating in clinical trials, you are contributing to find novel treatment options for individuals with EB, which is possible benefit not only for yourself, but also for other individuals with EB. So how can you find the right trial for yourself or your child? You can, of course, check the page of DEBRA International. There are several clinical trials listed there, specifically those that are funded by DEBRA. But you should also check clinical trial registries. These might be sometimes difficult to understand, so this is easier for physicians to click there. As I mentioned, ClinicalTrials.gov, which is an international clinical trial registry, or a European clinical trial registry, or for Germany, the Deutsches Register klinischer Studien. You can check there whether you can find a clinical trial that suits your diagnosis or your condition. And of course, you should visit your EB center and ask your EB doctor about new clinical trials for your specific subtype of disease to see whether you find something that suits you. I hope that I could give you an overview on the clinical trials. What does it mean to participate in one? What are the obligations? And what might be the advantages of participation? And I'm open for questions now.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We do have a few questions. Once again, to ask a question online, type your question into the field at the bottom of the Q&A window and push enter or click the send button. And we will be taking phone questions as well at the end of the program. Doctor, your first question, how do we ensure that the clinical information for participants is the same across so many sites?
Well, there is a study protocol, an approved study protocol from the company or the sponsor or whoever does the clinical trial, and this study protocol is the same for all sites. It might be translated in another language, but it is the same. And according to this trial protocol, we have to perform all the trial visits. And of course, there are monitors, meaning people that are just taking care that we all do the same things. So it is very carefully viewed whether the same things are done in each center. Next question, please.
Thank you, doctor. Next question, will patient participants in the trial receive the cream indefinitely?
So, as I mentioned, in the SD005 trial, it's for 3 months. And then you can go to the open label extension study. We don't know yet whether the cream will be received indefinitely, but this might be the case. If you need more information about that, you should again contact your EB doctor.
Thank you.
Next question, please.
Has the need for daily dressing changes been a barrier to recruitment?
I mean, I can't comment that much on how this trial is going. I'm obliged as a principal investigator not to tell you that much about recruitment, but I guess this is something that everybody understands, that this might be a challenge for patients.
Thank you. Next question. From a clinician point of view, how can DEBRA help with information and support for people participating in clinical trials?
I think this webinar is already a very good idea. It is important to get more people or more persons with EB understand why are clinical trials important. And clinical trials have been conducted for other types of disorders like cancer since many, many years. But people have to be informed, and I guess more of these webinars or maybe also some links on the DEBRA page where patients can find more information on clinical trials, this might help.
Thank you. And our last question. What if a physician is not participating in a clinical trial? Will the doctor suggest I go somewhere else?
This might also happen at times. So I know that we are doing this also for other trials when our center is not participating, but we think that the trial is good, then we suggest to our patients, please visit another center. There you can participate in the trial. I think it's fair to say that this is how it should work.
All right, that was our last question. Thank you very much, Dr. Kuritsi. And our next speaker is Jane Gershkowitz. Jane?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. We really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this webinar, so thank you to DEBRA International for making it possible. And today I just want to give you folks a brief introduction to Amicus Therapeutics. We may not be as familiar to some members of the EB community as we are in other rare disease communities in which the company has been working for many years. So in introducing Amicus to you, we are a biotechnology company. We are based in central New Jersey in a town called Cranberry, and I'll show you a little bit more about our locations in a minute. And we are really focused on developing advanced therapies to treat a range of devastating rare and orphan diseases. And here you can see that we have three different representations of rare diseases, those which are our primary focus. And on the far left, you see siblings who live with Pompe disease. They have their mobility, their respiratory affected, and yet these kids are very productive in their school and social lives. In the center, there's a family with Fabry disease, which has a different mode of inheritance, so there are many members throughout different generations of a family affected, and that brings with it different challenges. And then, of course, on the far right, you see a newborn who is going to be living with EB. I want to call your attention to the logos at the bottom of this particular slide because Amicus, back in the last quarter of 2015, acquired Scioderm. Scioderm is a small biotech company based in North Carolina here in the States, which has been developing the product SD101, or as Dr. Kritze referred to it as Zorblissa. And as I mentioned, we are based in Cranbury, New Jersey, with our global headquarters, international headquarters just outside of London. And as we build out our international organization, we currently have offices in Germany, France, Netherlands, and Spain. With our lead program for Fabry disease, we are experiencing this growth, and it actually is a very, very exciting time for the company. So with the overall mission of being dedicated to developing new treatments that can help people living with a range of rare diseases is this dedication that Amicus has to improving the lives of patients and families affected by these rare and orphan diseases. And that really is at the heart of the company. We have a colleague in Europe who often says it's the DNA of Amicus. And so with that is the work that we do in patient and professional advocacy, which is the function of the company which I have been leading with the company almost 10 years. I do want to say that Amicus started back in 2002 with technology that spun out of the Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York City, so that our work was originally academically based, and the company has been developing on a pretty consistent trajectory since 2002. So I hope that those of you in the patient community have some familiarity with patient advocacy. Certainly you do from the work that organizations such as DEBRA International does and other individual disease organizations, as well as some broader, what we call umbrella associations, such as the European Organization for Rare Disorders, or its sister organization here in the States called NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disorders. But within companies in the life sciences, there is a growing trend to have a patient advocacy function. And as I mentioned here at Amicus, that's really been part of the company from its earliest days. And we work externally. We work with certainly individuals and families and their caregivers who are living with diseases, with the professionals such as Dr. Kritze at different centers of excellence, treatment centers, not around medical issues as much, but around patient support and patient education and how we can help to support programs that a center might want to produce for its patient population. We certainly work with patient organizations around the world and in different disease areas, such as DEBRA International and DEBRA America, and I have a slide referring to that in just a couple of minutes. We also work with our own colleagues in industry because there are best practices that we think it's important to share, and that just as Mike said earlier on today about the learnings that are important to bring the body of knowledge forward for a disease, we feel that when it comes to patient advocacy, it's important to share those learnings as well. And then also there's quite a bridge between patient advocacy and public policy. And the public policy area can be individual legislative initiatives or laws that refer to how drugs are developed, what are the regulatory pathways. And from a patient advocacy, I would say that our the area that we consider most important for us to be aware of and to perhaps help to effect safe change is around access, because we feel that people should have access to clinical studies, to investigational drugs, and obviously to approved products in their geographies. We also have our internal stakeholders here at the company, and we really work cross-functionally. We really work across the board with all of our colleagues, because having the patient understanding at our core, wanting to be patient-driven from the unmet medical needs of patients, it's important that not only do we in patient advocacy understand those issues, but that everybody else does, whether it's our medical affairs and our safety colleagues who are working directly with physicians, our colleagues in clinical operations who are designing the protocols, designing the clinical trials, and wanting to have the patient voice. And I'll address something particular to that in a moment. And just sort of around the board, even science and early work where we're trying to understand what is a disease, what is the experience of patients and families within that disease, and is that something that we may want to investigate for a future program. And so to go into a little bit more depth in how we look at our role, our work with the patient community, we really see relationships at the core. We strive to have trusted and transparent communications with the leadership of different patient organizations. We do our very best to make sure that all of those exchanges are within the compliance guidelines, not only our own company policies, but also the compliance guidelines of whatever country within which we're operating, attending a meeting, or having that scientific engagement. And the way we learn is from the patient community. So on the left side where we talk about community insights, community information, that's really to understand what is the perspective of people living with these diseases, what are the needs that may be met, but what are the ones that are not yet met. And so we learn that by talking to people like Michael from DEBRA International, attending conferences. I was fortunate with a colleague to attend the DEBRA International Conference last October in London, and just learned such an incredible amount and was so inspired by the people there, and then able to bring that information back to our EB cross-functional team. Besides attending meetings and conferences, one of the things that we have developed here at Amicus and is now entering, I think it's probably its 8th or 9th year, is our Patient Advisory Board program. So we have an ongoing group of people who represent different disease experiences and geographies, and they come together on a fairly regular basis, at least once a year in person and then virtually through webinars and other means, to really give us input, to give us advice on the program that we're developing and which we hope will result in something that can help their disease community. We also look at education and awareness tools. So what are the things that we can produce, whether they're we've recently been doing things called infographics, so information that we can help people to better understand their disease. It is not medical information that comes from people's physicians, but it's certainly what we hope is information that can help people to think about how they are going to take care of their own health. And I think that earlier on, Mike Yeager talked about that, about being somebody who takes ownership of one's own health, and that's something that we would like to advocate for with the people we speak with. We also have the ability to understand what are other resources that may be available and to share those with people, even though it may not be something that Amicus does. It might be something around seeking respite care or help with medical durable equipment or things of that nature. And then as the company progresses, we expect to be doing more and more around patient services. One of the areas that we have been involved with for quite a while is an educational grants and charitable contributions program, so we certainly support the patient community in that manner, and also, as I mentioned, offering information and referral services. And then on the far right, the public policy, I think I've already addressed that, but what are the intersections between policy, certainly access, and patient knowledge and care, and how can we advocate for that? So in our work with the EB community, and I will admit it's not very long that we've been involved with the EB community. We started back in October of 2015, and myself and my colleagues in other departments, I would say our learning curve is pretty steep here, and we really we dived right in, and we have been able to start building our relationships with the leaders of different DEBRA organizations, as well as with the EB Research Partnership here in the U.S. I've also been speaking with other research focused foundations and organizations outside the U.S. to really understand what is it that's happening in the community, what's working, what are people looking for, but also how can we work together, how can we help all of you. And I certainly hope that at the next time that we have the opportunity to provide information through a webinar or through anything else, that this list of EB community organizations with which Amicus has a connection continues to grow. So with that, I'll just, on behalf of my entire team, thank you all again for your attention. This is how to get in touch with us. I will just briefly tell you that besides myself, and I'm really, it's my team, Neeta Patel is a nurse with many, many years of rare disease and genetic research nursing experience. She's our senior director based here in New Jersey. Jenny Wilson is our head of international, and she's based in London. So she is the touch point for people throughout Europe. And then actually just as of this week, we have been fortunate to have Mr. Michael Loso join our team. Michael's a longtime patient advocate and policy expert here in the States, and he will be focusing much of his time on our EB program. We are very dedicated to the community, and therefore we thought it was very important to have a dedicated member working with all of you, with the organizations, and building our relationships. And at any point, we are available to answer questions, and if we don't know the answers, we will do our very best to get them to you, and people can always reach us at patientadvocacy@amicusrx.com. So with that, I thank you again to Michael and DEBRA International and to all of those who are on the line and have taken the time to participate in the webinar. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. We do have a few questions for you. Also to the participants, if you'd like to ask a question by phone, please push *# on your telephone keypad now. Once again, that's *#. If you are asking a question by phone, please turn off the sound on your computer speakers. Jane, the first question, can I get a list of the questions being asked so I can compile them to our FAQs? I am an MSL with Amicus.
So we're fortunate that Blue Sky is recording today's webinar for everybody. The webinar will then be archived through DEBRA International, and for people who are in other countries where English may not be their primary language, we have decided with Michael that Blue Sky will help with translations into some key languages so that anybody who is on this webinar will be able to see the questions that have been asked through a transcript, and then for others who've been unable to participate today, they'll be able to get into the archive webinar at their convenience.
Great, thank you. Our next question, when can we expect some results from the phase 3 trials, and how long does that normally take?
So right now, as Dr. Carizzi mentioned, the study is still enrolling patients. So we have people who are participating. We have new people coming into the screening process and continuing through. But we do expect late this year to have some initial results. And it has been Amicus's practice in our other studies that as appropriate when results have been reviewed and what we call scrubbed, so we understand them, and it's the most appropriate time, then we do make that information known to the community.
Thank you. Our next question, how long do you estimate it will be before Zorblissa is on the market?
So I love that question because every time I speak with the patient community, and even with physicians sometimes, everybody always says, even if you started the study a week before, they want to know when the product's going to be available in the market. You know, as Dr. Carizzi mentioned, we have protocols in our industry. These studies can take a long time. This particular study is 3 months in duration, but that's for each patient in the study. So, you know, it takes a while. This is phase 3. We hope to get results that will continue to be promising like we saw in phase 2. And then there's another whole process that a company needs to go through. Once data is is known, going through that data, developing all of the submission materials, and that is a huge undertaking for any company to file for approval, to file in Europe, in the U.S., and then other countries. So it really takes quite a while. We have no way of knowing if we will be able to have this product approved. We certainly hope for the community that will happen. So it's hard to say when it would be, and I don't think that we can until the study is done and we see what the data is.
Great. Thank you, Jane. That was our last question. And I think we have some final thoughts from Michael Fitzpatrick. Michael?
Yes, thanks, Robert. Thank you, Jane, Mike, and Dr. Kuytsi. Much appreciated for everybody's time. As I said, we're about to open up to question and answers, and people will be able to ask. But I just want to take the opportunity to thank everybody for joining in, because I know that this webinar at the moment we've got people from lots of different countries taking part, and it's very challenging to do a webinar at a time that's suitable for anybody, especially when you're trying to deal with everybody around the globe. So thank you for everybody for making those efforts. Just wanted to reiterate that the DEBRA International does have a very good research page where there's lots of information about clinical trials, and there's frequently asked questions on there as well. So that may be something that clinicians or companies may want to refer people to if they're getting questions.
Could I just say, Michael, I've just shared that page on the DEBRA International Facebook page and Twitter if people want to go directly to that page.
Yep. So yeah, that's excellent. So there's some very good resources there as well. So yeah, thanks for that, Mike. There's just on the clinicaltrials.gov website that Dr. Kuytsi referred to before. At the moment, there's around about 8 clinical trials listed there as recruiting, and there's about another 6 that are not yet recruiting. So we are seeing a lot more clinical trials coming through, and there's also other sites as well. There's in every country or every region, just about, there's different protocols again. So I know that some people refer to the FDA and to the European Medicines Agency and things like that, but also in your local region there may be particular requirements around clinical trials, and that's as well that you may need to be aware of and ask your clinician about as well. So they're just some observations. So yeah, I'm happy, Robert, to open it up for any other voice questions.
And it doesn't look like we have any phone-in questions. But we do have another question. Jane, sadly the outcomes of many EB trials are never reported. Will you report the Phase 3 results in a way that is accessible to the patient community?
So that is a great question, and I appreciate it, because one of the things that through patient advocacy, working with our colleagues, we are trying to determine the best way to communicate clinical trial results. First, to individuals who participate in the study so that their principal investigator, their physician, can let them know what's going on with the study, and then how we do this in a more overarching way to the community. And so we do work to make sure that in a compliant way we can share that information. It also is something that's becoming required by regulators in different countries, that companies must publish the results of studies that are posted for recruitment. So as Michael was just mentioning, there's the clinicaltrials.gov that's from the FDA here in the U.S., There's an EMA site, and then other countries may have their sites. It is becoming a requirement that if a study must be posted, and if a study is posted, that eventually the results must be posted as well. So it's our intention to obviously comply with any of those requirements, but also to determine by working with the organization leaders, by working with our patient advisory boards, what is the best way to, in lay language, explain what the results of the study are. So it is our intention to share this information when it's available.
All right. Thank you very much, Jane. It looks like we had a comment here that while all clinical differ principles presented by DEBRA apply to all, plus that early trials recruit patients most likely to benefit and for whom it's safest, so people shouldn't be disappointed if not initially chosen for a trial. So we wanted to get that information out before we closed. Once again, thank you to all of today's speakers and for their insights. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation, and everyone have a great day.